When I was 20, I lived with a clear feeling inside me that everything would eventually fall into place on its own. It wasn't optimism, it was blind faith in time, as if simply growing up were enough to earn the right to something good. I looked at adults, and they seemed like people who had just waited long enough. I saw every human life as a straight line, a road already mapped out, that inevitably led to a job, a house, a family. That's why I didn't worry. I felt that one way or another, my life would figure itself out. All I had to do was endure, hold on, and keep some kind of moral and practical decency. After 25, I still believed it was just a matter of time. I worked wherever I could, adapted, jumped from one project to another, convinced it was only temporary, a passing stage before things would finally balance out. I was sure youth was just preparation for something stable, that every mistake was an investment in a stronger future. I could ignore exhaustion, lack of direction, and instability, because I carried that quiet arrogance of those who believe maturity will fix everything. I thought that sooner or later, my moment would come. I wasn't in a hurry, because I didn't yet see time as the tightening grip it eventually becomes. But once I had passed my 30s, something began to crack. Around 35, I started to really look at reality, and it stared back at me with a face I no longer recognized. There was no longer the promise of the future, nor the excuses of youth. I looked around and realized that everything I had always been waiting for hadn't arrived, and most likely never would, unless I built it myself. It was a slow, ruthless awakening. I realized that life doesn't get delivered to your door, that no one ever calls to say, "It's your turn." I had grown up believing that being a decent person, working honestly, avoiding too much harm would be enough, and that the world, in return, would hold up its end of the deal. But that deal never existed. 35 is an invisible border where everything starts to weigh more. I realized that the time I had already spent would never come back. Every decision I'd avoided had become a closed road, and every chance I'd let slip away had turned into a quiet but heavy presence that kept following me everywhere I went. I began to look at myself in the mirror with a new, almost brutal clarity. I stopped telling myself the story that there's still time, because it wasn't true anymore. Time had stopped being an ally. I realized I hadn't built anything, not because I was incapable, but because I had always believed that building wasn't necessary. That's when the first real questions began, the kind that don't look for quick answers, but dig deep, crawl under your skin, and won't let you sleep again. Because they aren't questions about the future. They're about the very meaning of living. I started to wonder what sense there was in running towards something that didn't exist. What value there was in a life spent chasing goals that never felt like mine. I looked at the people around me, those with careers, families, children, and I wondered if they were truly happy or just more disciplined in their performance. I couldn't see much difference, only for people who had accepted the rules of the game with greater obedience. And in the meantime, I was changing, day after day, almost without realizing it. The lightness I once had as a young man had turned into a constant weight. It wasn't sadness, it was clarity. When you start seeing the world for what it really is, without illusions, you can never look at it the same way again. Everything becomes clearer, but colder too. Awareness is a kind of anesthetic that doesn't let you sleep. You don't feel the old emotions anymore, but you stay awake, watching everything, powerless. Now I'm 45, and that awareness has never left me. It has become part of me, a lens that distorts and defines everything at the same time. I look at my life and see a landscape worn out by time, a collection of attempts, restarts, and failed illusions. There's no anger left, no regret, only fatigue. I know there won't be a moment when everything makes sense. I know time won't give back what it has taken. I know no achievement will ever fill the emptiness that awareness leaves behind. And yet, in the middle of it all, I keep moving. Every day I try to find a balance between clarity and hope, between surrender and the need to keep standing. The world wears me down, not out of cruelty, but because I can no longer love it. I can't accept its rules. I can't believe in its promises. It asks me for enthusiasm, and I have none left. It asks me for faith, and I have only doubts. It asks me to dream, and I can no longer sleep. I often find myself wondering who I'd be today if I'd never opened my eyes, if I'd stayed inside that naive belief that everything would eventually come. Maybe I'd be calmer, maybe blinder, but maybe also a little less tired. Awareness didn't save me. It just taught me how not to lie. And living without lies is an exhausting exercise. Every day you have to face reality stripped bare. And reality, when it's naked, is never kind. Some people say, I can still start over, that there's always time to change direction. But I have my doubts. I'm not afraid to try again. I'm afraid to fool myself again. And maybe that's what real aging is, not the loss of strength, but the loss of illusion. When you stop believing that life is taking you somewhere, you become still, stuck halfway between the past and something you can no longer imagine. And yet I keep walking, even though I don't know why anymore. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of a kind of dignity that refuses to give up completely. The world wears me down, yes, but somewhere inside me, there's still a small spark that refuses to die. I don't know if it's hope or just stubbornness, but it keeps me alive just enough to keep looking ahead, even if I no longer believe in happiness. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if there will ever be a different time, if I'll find a new way to live without dreaming. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just stay here, suspended in this fragile balance between surrender and courage. But one thing I do know, I've seen life up close, and despite everything, even if I can no longer love it, I can still feel it running through me. And maybe in some quiet way, that too is a way of staying alive.